So in the previous video, we went through how to move around your 3D viewport, how to zoom in and out, and move around, and also the basic transform tools of moving an object, scaling an object, and rotating. If you're not sure how to do those things, I suggest popping back to the previous video and going through that. But in this video, we're going to learn about adding in some more basic shapes. We're going to learn how to add colour to those shapes, and we're going to have a couple of challenges to you to try and get used to adding in the shapes, moving them around, duplicating objects, things like that, and try and get you more comfortable and used to building some creations and try and get a bit creative with it at the same time. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you how to add in some new shapes. So if we come up to the add button up here, we can add in, if we come to mesh, we'll ignore the rest of them for now, and we've got a few new mesh items we can add in from here. There's cubes like we've got at the moment, but let's add in a UV sphere. And the first thing it does, it pops in the center there. And so if we press G and X, we can move them across to there. We can add in another sphere, an icosphere this time. G and X. I wouldn't worry about their different names too much. They are both spheres, are just made up slightly differently, and we'll get more into that when we start looking in them, how these objects are made up there, how their mesh is made up on the inside. We can also add objects in a different way. If we do Shift A, we can then get the same add menu, the same menu we had at the top, but we've got it to wherever our mouse button is at the time. So if we now come down, we can add in a cylinder, and we can add in a cone, and we can add in a torus, which is basically kind of a donut sort of shape. And you can use these basic shapes as a building block to other creations. So you can start with blocking things out with these sort of basic shapes to then kind of get the feel of how and what you want things, and then grow and expand them from there. So for now, we're not going to worry about the rest of the basic shapes. We're going to start with just the cube. So we're going to select the other items and do Shift click and select the other ones in there, and press X and delete. The other way I can do it is up in the outliner here, so I can press on the cone and then shift click the cylinder and press X to delete, and delete that there. And we're going to start with this cube, and we're going to try and make a block person from the cube. Just to explain again, so to get to that view, I use the little green dot in the gimbal up here. You can also press number pad 1 if you've got a number pad at the side of your keyboard, and that'll also bring you around to this front view here. So I'm going to take my block here, and I'm going to G to grab and Z to move them up, and just start with that. So I'm going to add in another cube up here, and I'm going to use this as the head. So G to grab and Y, even Z should I say, go above the head, and I use S to scale and scale him down a bit. G and then Z, and let's just place him a little bit above the body there. So again, we can do Shift A and add in another cube, and I'm going to scale him this time, but just in the Z axis, just to make him a little bit smaller in that axis. G and Z brings him up. So we're just mostly making this the chest sort of area, and this more the waist sort of area. So I'm going to add in one more cube, and so I'll do Shift A and add in another cube, and G, Z, bring him down. Let's try and make a leg. So to make a leg, I'll need to scale him in the X axis, so shorten him down that way. G to grab, and I'm just going to, not even constrain to an X, I'm just going to free roam here and just place him there. Now I want to make another leg below. This is the upper leg. I want to make the lower leg. Rather than having to bring in a new object and to reposition and remake that all the time, I can duplicate this object and use all of its sizing and everything that's been done to it and make another version of it, a copy of it. So if I do Shift and then press D, I now have a duplicate version of that cube. So I can bring him down here, make a lower leg. And I think this size will work quite good for arms as well. So I do Shift and D again and bring him up to an arm position. I'm going to press R to rotate. And again, because we're in orthographic view up here, we're in front orthographic. I haven't moved off orthographic. I'm constrained in this axis for when I'm rotating. So I'm only rotating in the Y axis. So I can't rotate in X or Z anyway. If I'd moved off from here, and I wanted to rotate, and I tried to rotate around without pressing a letter, obviously it'd be going all over the place, and I would have to constrain that to the X axis to rotate around, or to the Y axis, depending on what I was trying to achieve there. So I'm going to go back to number pad 1 and or this green dot here to get back to this view, and rotate it back about there. So that's made that arm, and let's duplicate him again, bring him across it. Now, because I've not pressed a key, I'm going to press X to constrain that, because I want to keep this in line with this upper arm here to make the lower arm, and such. And now I'm going to do one more time. I'm going to Shift D, move it in the X-axis across, and just scale that on the X to make a block hand, like so. So we need to do the same again now, but for all the other side. Now I can select multiple objects at the same time, so I can select both of these, and now hold down Shift and press the next one, and duplicate them both at the same time. And so again, Shift D, and move that across in the X-axis. And there we have another set of legs. I can do the same with the arm up here. I can box select there and do Shift D to duplicate. Bring that over here and rotate that around. Now I don't have to do it manually. I know I want to rotate 180 degrees. So if I type in 180, it'll rotate it around 180 degrees. And I can then place that arm about there. So I think we should do one more. We should probably put some feet on him as well. I'll give him hands, we should give him feet. So I'll duplicate that down here, bring it down, scale on the Z, GZ, duplicate that across, just moving by hand at this stage, and there we go. So I'm now going to move out of orthographic back into perspective, and see we've got it's quite a wide man. So we probably want to narrow some of these down. So if I can use my box select there to grab all the legs, or if I want to do all the objects at the same time, I can press A for all, or grab all the objects that are available in the viewport, and I could then scale them on the Y-axis. I'll do that a bit. Now, I don't think I'm going to want to scale the head down, so I'm going to Shift, click on the head, and then click him again, and that'll deselect the head there. So the first time I clicked the object, the first time I clicked it, it turned yellow, and I have to click it again to deselect it completely. And now I can go back to Shift and or scale, should I say, S for scale and Y, and bring that down to something like that. So I think the chest should stay that size, but the arms and the legs can scale on the Y a little bit more, just to narrow out there. And we have our first block man using just cubes. Challenge you now that if you haven't already been doing so, to pause this video and try and make a block man like this. So remembering to add in cubes and to scale and rotate them accordingly. Use your orthographic view over here, that's number pad 1, to line up in this direction, and just add in the cubes either as new mesh each time, add mesh, or control Shift A even to add in there, or to duplicate objects, again with Shift D to duplicate things as such, and make a man. That'll be a good chance to practice your transform tools with moving things around and rotating them and scaling them and such, and also give you a little bit of practice moving around the viewport. Once you've done that, come back to this video and we shall move on to adding some colour to our block man. So before we go on to adding some colour, I'm just going to do one last transform thing. I'm going to select both these feet, and I'm going to come across the side here, and I'm going to scale them in the X, oh no, sorry, I mean even the Y axis, just to make the feet a little bit longer, and then G and Y and move them across. If I use the little gimbal up here, I come to this view on the side, number pad 3 button, and I can just position those feet. I'll make them a little bit deeper actually, there you go. And so just add them a little bit pointy out feet. And there we go. Right, so adding in colour. So there are a couple of options for doing this. One of the ways, which we won't worry about too much, but I shall show you briefly, is coming to the shading tab. So you can see we're actually in another set of tabs up here. We're in layout mode, which is the one you want to do most of your work in. There's ones for doing modelling and sculpting and UV editing and texturing. And there's one called shading. And if we press that, it'll take us to this scary new setup of things. And again, this is just a series of small windows inside your whole view screen. Once again, you can click to drag if you hold, if you wait till the cursor changes as you're in between these windows. You can move things around, get rid of things. These are again just tabs within each window. So again, this is still the 3D viewport, but you've got a few new things open here. If we click back on the first cube, which is this chest for me in this case, up here in the outliner, that would be the first cube up here. We really should name these, which we'll get to soon as well. Then you'll see it's already got material added to it. All these other cubes don't have a material added in, but they all look white still. And that's because the base material is just white. So you've got lots of options down here, and in this panel you go lots of crazy things where you can add in other images and noise textures and lots of different weird and wonderful things. But for now, let's not worry about that. So we'll come back to the layout, and we'll come over here instead to our properties panel. So I'm going to come down to this red dot here, this red little globe sort of symbol here actually, and this takes us to our material panel. Again, it's all the same options as you would have had in the shading panel there, laid out for us in this sort of bit nice, clearer, easier to sort of get used to for now option. So again, if you were on a different cube, you wouldn't have anything there, but you can get a new material assigned to it by pressing new here, and a new material is assigned to this cube. One final thing we're going to need to look at is this top right hand corner up here. So at the moment I've got this solid round button, which is the viewport shading, which is just pretty much a grayed out version of all your objects. So it's a solid view for seeing everything in. The next one along to the right is viewport shading, and for here we can start seeing colors. So we're going to stay on this one for now for a bit. So we've got the head selected at the moment, so I'm going to give a rough kind of skin colorage to it. I'm not even going to think too heavily about it. I'm just going to put in a rough sort of shade like that. And that's made a sort of start of a colour thing. A bit further down here, we've got lots of different options about metallicness, spectacular. A good one to use for now is roughness. So I'm going to click on roughness and drag it up just to give it a little bit of rougher. If I take it down, it gets a bit more shiny. Click it up. You can't really see that from there. Let's zoom in a little bit more. So yes, we're fully rough at the moment, and if I go down the other way, we're quite shiny. It starts the reflection of the viewport shading seen around us and that sort of thing. So I'm going to take that up because I make it a slightly more rougher feel, which helps to bring out the colour a little bit. And I might just take that skin colour tone and just bring it down a little bit, just to give us something like that. I'm also going to name this material, which will make it easier for future things. So materials label material 001. If I click here, I can now rename this to skin, and that's now changed that to skin as well. I might also come up here to where I have the list of all the cubes we've added in, double click on this cube I've got selected here, and type in head. And he's now disappeared further down, so we're in alphabetical order, but that's great, we know he is head now. So if I click on the body, I've already got a material, but we just want to change its colour. So I'm going to come to base colour here, same as I did for the head, and I'm going to change that to, I don't know, something bluish wise. And again, I might bring the value down to darken it up a bit, make it a darker blue one there. And again, click into this here and change the name to blue. No, I'll change it to top. I think I'll change it to. So we've got two materials now. So we can now come to these other objects, and I click on his arm for starters. Now, rather than adding in a new material, I can reuse the material I already have. So if I click on this little drop down menu, this little icon next to new, then I've got options for skin and for top. So if I press the top one, I can change that material. So this is now the same material. If I come to base color and start changing the material, it changed it for both of them at the same time. So it's the two objects are sharing that same material. I just undid that to colour change there because I quite like that blue. So I'm going to come to the other arm, and I'm going to shift and click on the waist and the two legs as well. And I'm going to come up here and change them all to top. But I can't work like that because it only changes the selected object. I tried to do all that, and only this one outlined in yellow, which was the last one I selected, changes colour. All the rest were outlined in orange and they don't change colour. So I'm going to need to, for now, come to those manually, come up here and change them all to that same top colour. To do it all the slightly slower manual way. Now there is another way we can do this as well, which I shall show you for the head skin cover. So if I shift click and select all of these, I'm going to click the legs and the hands and the lower arms, and then click the head as the last one. This last one I selected is outlined in yellow, and that is the active object, and all the others are referred to as the selected object. And it's important that this is the last one because this has got the material in. Now if I press Ctrl L, I can make links, and in this case we want to make links to the materials. So there's lots of different options here which we'll get to in the future, but the one I care about here is materials. And now that has made a link and linked all these objects to that sound and to that same material that was on my selected object. And again, that's because he was last, he had the material on to then copy to all the other ones that I'd already selected. So that's made a link between all the other objects and that were selected, the selected objects, and with the final object, that was the active object, the final object that I'd clicked that had that yellow outline. So the final thing I'm going to do is just give him some shoes. So again, I'll make a new material and I'm just going to give him some nice blackish sort of shoes, rough them up slightly and call that shoe material. Come to that one and just put in shoes there. Now I failed dismally on labeling all of these up, but again I can now just click on chest and double click on there and type in chest, or if I click on cube 02, which is the waist, if I hit F2 I now bring up the object name change as well, so I can just, rather than having to double click it, which can get a bit messy sometimes, I can just click there and with F2 and change that name there. Splendid. So if I was you, I would suggest pausing the video there and just having a little play with adding in new materials, change the shoe colours and just add in a few colours to your block man, woman, person or whatever you've created at this stage, and just sort of set a few basic colours on your person there. So I hope you've gotten all right with that and you've all managed to add in some shapes and make a basic block character like this or something similar, or whatever you've done. I hope you've had fun doing it. The next thing I'm going to do is to show you how to group all these objects together. And there are, again, a couple of ways depending exactly what you're after. So I'm going to group these together into basically like a folder. So if I select all these objects, I can do that either in the outliner out here. I can shift select and select all those. I could do it as one big box select out here and grab all those objects and press the keyboard shortcut M to move them to a new collection. I'm going to label that collection Blockman. Press OK. We can see in the outliner now there's a new folder essentially has been created, and all those objects, which are, I hope you admire, they are all nice and neatly labelled up, I hope you also had too, are now all together. So I can press this little arrow and have them all grouped together, and again I've got the little eye icon there so I can make him disappear and come back, but I got that all as one button push now rather than having to select all these individual ones to make them either disappear and come back. And now another thing I could do is to have joined them all together as one single object. Then again, there might be reasons you want to do this or not. So again, if I shift select all these objects together and do Control J, and they will all be joined together as one object, and that'll be whatever was the active object that was selected. So the chest must have been the last object I was selected in that, and he was obviously outlined in yellow, or was the active object regardless, and so they've all now been joined as one singular object. This is all together as one object. So depending on what you're trying to achieve and what you work in the future, you either might want to group them together as lots of different objects just in one collection up here. That's what these are called. These folders are called collections as here all together, or you might want to join them as one singular object together. So there's just a couple of ways you can work. So I have moved on ahead and I've started doing a couple of things for your next challenge, which essentially is to make more objects, more scenes, more things, but still just using basic shapes, but moving away from the block cube shape now, and moving to all the other shapes you have, all the circles and spheres and cylinders and things. Just kind of get used to putting them together and just making a few things and adding on colours to them. So the first one I'm going to show you that I created was a pencil. Nice and straightforward here, so it's just lots of cylinders. So there's a main cylinder in the middle. I made a slightly scaled up cylinder here on the X and Y axis, but scaled them a lot smaller on the Z. A little rubber on the end there, and pencil head, and then just a little cheat. I just put another little cone slightly scaled up on top just to give that tip of the pencil there. We also, let's get rid of that, let's have a bear instead over here. And this is lots of spheres essentially. So I use icospheres, the triangly type one, for the head and the body, and the arms and the legs as well. Again, just scaled them accordingly to get the kind of shape and size I wanted. And then I used UV spheres for these little insert bits. So I made ears, and then I made a slightly bigger one for the ear there, and a slightly smaller one just sticking out. And I put little pads on his hands as well. And again, just the same with the eyes. I just use one sphere for the white, and then put another little sphere, just smaller, and just pointing out in front for the iris, essentially, the black of the eye. And then, again, the same with the nose, and a couple more spheres really stretched out for his mouth then. Again, I'm not making any magical, amazing art here, but it is a good chance to make some basic sort of make some basic sort of things using objects, and just getting really good use to moving those things around and scaling them, changing the size, and just getting a good sort of feel and use for the viewport, and adding in and changing objects before moving any further forward. So the last thing I'm going to show you here is this little tyre course that I've made over here. The ground is just basically fairly straightforward. It's just 3 cubes that have got different colours on to give a bit of a gradient to the floor there. But the tyres are made up of toruses that have been scaled down and then obviously scaled up on the Z slightly to get that tyre somewhat shape. The only difference I've done here particularly is I've shaded them smooth, which I haven't showed you. So if I right click on this one here, I get this group of selections here, and the top 2 is shade smooth and shade flat. So if I click on shade flat, it'll go back to this sort of flatter shading sort of view where you can see all the facets on, see all the edgings, all the faces that'll be inside and that sort of thing. And if I right click and go shade smooth, it'll turn just like the others, give a much smoother view to it. So you might want to try that early on, just shading smooth some of your objects just to take off some of that edging there. With this material as well, I've obviously also ramped up the roughness quite high up to give it a bit of a rubber sort of feel. So that's a few of my objects that I've tried creating here with just some basic shapes. I recommend at this stage just take some time, think up some different ideas, look around the space, look around where you're at, or search on the internet for some inspiration and that sort of thing, and just try and add in some basic shapes and try and make some new creations, add some colour to them, and just have a chance to be a bit creative and have a bit of fun basically, and just try and make some new different stuff from there. In future videos, I'm going to try and go through edit mode, which is when we get into looking at how the mesh is made up inside each object, and how we can manipulate that to get much more detail into our objects. But for now, I hope you have fun, and I'll see you in a future video.